What's up? So today for this video, I'm going to be making some comparisons between NBA players and rappers. And that's just because, well, one, the NBA finals are going on, so it's probably a better time than ever to make this video. And two, it's because this is not a new idea at all. But whenever I've seen a video like this or just an internet article about this, it's always been the most basic and generic comparisons. Like they'll put LeBron and Jay-Z together or Michael Jordan and Tupac just because they're both really good. Like the reason I'm making this video is because I want to go deeper into it and actually put a lot more thought into the comparisons that I'm making. And yeah, you guys will see that when I actually start getting into it. So let's jump into it. Mac Miller and Blake Griffin are two guys that are, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, are really likable dudes. Like I haven't heard anybody say anything bad about them as people, and they both have evolved and grown a lot as their careers went on. Mac seemed like a really funny and genuine guy, from what I've seen from interviews and what other rappers have said about him. And Blake is someone I feel like could have a real career in comedy after his career ends in basketball, just because I've seen some of his stand-up sets and some of his skits, and the dude's got some charisma and good timing. But the main comparison I'm making is the one I said before. They both just evolved so much as their careers went on. And that's not to say that they were bad as their, at the beginning of their careers, but there's no doubt that there was a definite shift, as as it went on in their later years. Mac went from the whole frat boy rap sound to a more, intelligent and smooth style of music. And Blake, he was a guy that relied mostly on his athleticism and dunking. And nowadays he's a guy with a lot more skill in basketball IQ. Like there's been possessions I've seen from Blake where he's been dribbling the ball like a straight up point guard. Like it's pretty impressive. It's been impressive to see from both of them. Jaden Smith and Tim Hardaway Jr. are two guys that have a lot of potential. And they've seen a lot of success in their own right, but they just have fathers that are a lot more successful and are more well known. Jaden's father is obviously Will Smith, the Grammy-winning global movie star, and Tim Hardaway Jr.'s father is obviously Tim Sr., who is one of the best point guards the NBA's ever seen. I was gonna say they have some big shoes to fill, but Tim is 6 inches taller than his dad and has a completely different play style. And Jaden, it's not really a hot take to say this, but in my opinion, he makes much better music. And he also has a completely different style of music. So I'll just say, keep doing your thing. Kyle and Jeremy Lin are connected in ways similar to the comparisons I was making with Mac and Blake Griffin. They're both just super likable and positive dudes that have had pretty similar careers. Jeremy Lin may have not had the most consistent success, but he has had some really big moments, and the same goes for Kyle. Jeremy's career almost ended before we saw it begin. He was cut from the Warriors and bounced around the G League until the Knicks gave him a fair shot. And the only reason that happened was because there were so many of his teammates getting injured that they had no choice but to put him in the starting lineup. And then that's when we were gifted with one of the most alluring and greatest moments in basketball history, Linsanity. But after that, his career kind of slowly declined until he got his ring in Toronto. Then we get to Kyle, who dropped two pretty well-liked albums with Beautiful Loser and Smile, but they didn't really do much outside of his core fan base. He definitely wasn't a small artist by any means, but he's much bigger today. Most people didn't really know who he was unless they were really into hip-hop. And then he dropped I Spy, which can kind of be comparable to Linsanity. Since I Spy, his career has had his ups and downs, which is actually one of my favorite songs by him. And that can also be comparable to Jeremy Lin's career. After their big moments that brought them mainstream attention, their careers kind of turned into roller coasters. Kyle would drop the occasional hit after I Spy, but none got to the same level as that song. And Jeremy Lin, while he's had some really good games after Linsanity, he just hasn't been that consistent, and he's been bouncing around a lot from team to team. But at least he got his ring in Toronto. Rakim and Pistol Pete are comparable for a pretty straightforward reason. They are both just way ahead of their time. Pistol Pete was dominating college basketball in the NBA in the 60s and 70s with a play style that no one had ever seen before. He had dribble moves that would be good by even today's standards, and he was just an amazing passer. He would play like this.
He's an incredible performer. With a rebound. Maravich with an underhanded pass. Here's a Maravich shot in the lane. It's good. Maravich with a hook.
In an era where everyone else is playing like this.
To pick and takes Cheney inside. They're trying to get it back to him. Oscar has Collins on him. 3 seconds left to Collins. He almost lost it. His hook shot is no good.
And with Rakim, he was just so far ahead of everyone in the lyricism department. He single-handedly took rap from the ABC elementary school rhymes to witty references, internal rhyme schemes, and a much more smooth and laid-back delivery. He didn't need to shout and make chants in his music, you know, all he needed was his flow and pen game. Run DMC were the biggest rappers when Eric B and Rakim were first starting out, and they basically made them obsolete overnight. I made the connection between Kanye and Dennis Rodman because they're both pretty controversial all-time greats. Kanye more so than Dennis, but still. And also because they set fashion trends. Kanye is the greatest rapper producer in my opinion, and Dennis is probably the best rebounding defender in NBA history. And they're both almost as controversial as they are great. I could make a whole video discussing Kanye's antics and controversies, but I don't really need to just because that's all public knowledge. The public already knows about that stuff, so we don't really need to go down that rabbit hole. But with Dennis, we only really knew some of the stuff. I didn't know like the full extent of it until I watched The Last Dance, and it was pretty interesting. I walked away from the documentary understanding him a lot better. Like beforehand, I thought of him as just like this really good but really weird player, but you realize after watching it that he's just the reason he was so like weird and controversial is just because he was an individualistic person, you know, like he didn't care what people thought of him. He needed to express himself, and you know, he needed time for himself, and I respect that. And because of their outlandish personalities, they both have kind of become icons in fashion. Rodman style, you know, the dyed hair, the piercings, the tattoos, the crazy outfits, women's clothing, like that, all that stuff was looked down upon in the 90s, and I really respect him for like doing all that despite what people were saying about him, because he got a lot of shit for it. And yeah, I just respect him for that, you know, he was a true individual. Fast forward to the 2010s and you get all these rappers with colorful hairstyles and face tats, and him and Allen Iverson they made future NBA players want to get tattoos and wear crazy outfits as well. The dude was just 20 years ahead of his time. And then you get to Kanye, who's just a streetwear icon. His Yeezy shoe line is one of the most popular ever, and he has countless collaborations with high-end brands. He also made shutter shades and backpacks and polos like the cool thing overnight. I put Cudi and Kevin Love together because they both have had really amazing starts to their careers, and it kind of slowly dwindled away over time, and also because they both have been open about their mental health struggles. Kid Cudi dropped his futuristic, highly successful, and highly acclaimed debut album Man on the Moon, which is one of my favorite albums ever, and it gave us a handful of massive hits like Day and Night, Pursuit of Happiness, and Soundtrack to My Life. And the sequel, Man on the Moon 2, gave us hits like Erase Me, Mr. Razor, and Mojo So Dope. I would honestly say that Cudi's first two albums is one of the best two album runs we've ever seen. And with Kevin Love, he just became a really dominant power forward in his early days on the Timberwolves, being known for his offensive skill set and rebounding prowess. He even recorded a 30-point, 30-rebound game in 2010, and if you know anything about basketball, you know how insane that is. And the Timberwolves didn't have much success while he was playing there, but he was definitely a top 3 power forward in the league while he was playing there. And the next comparison I made between them was the one I mentioned earlier, where I talk about how you know, despite how good their career started out, it kind of slowly just went downhill for them. Love's play just got worse and worse when he got traded to Cleveland, but that was for the sake of the Cavaliers' success. He had to take a back seat to LeBron and Kyrie, but that paid off because they won a championship. And with Cudi, his music lost a lot of its buzz when he dropped Wizard, and it just kept going downhill until it came to an all-time low with Speeding Bullet to Heaven, which is pretty notorious for being very bad. I still personally enjoyed a handful of songs from Cudi during that whole, you know, Wizard to Speeding Bullet era, but, you know, it was pretty clear that his music didn't have the same charm. Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying was the album that came next, and I enjoyed that personally, but it still didn't hit like his earlier stuff, and you can tell because it wasn't all that successful. He did make a really big comeback with Kanye on Kids See Ghost, and his collab with Travis Scott got him his first #1 song ever, which I'm really happy for because I'm a huge Cudi fan. And, you know, I can't really say the same for Kevin Love. Like, his career hasn't made a huge bounce back, but, you know, I can't predict the future, so maybe it will. The final comparison I'm making is how open they have been about their mental health. Cudi's subject matter was mostly about, you know, his depression and drug use, and that's part of the reason he was so big. In a time in hip-hop where no one was really talking about it, Cudi, you know, put himself out there and said, hey, I'm not okay, and it's okay to not be okay all the time. And that was something that resonated a lot with millions and millions of people because, like I said, nobody in hip-hop was really talking about that, and that was part of the reason he was so big and had such a strong fan base. And with Kevin Love, he wrote a Players Tribune article in 2018 about his panic attacks he had been recently suffering from. He talked about how the first 29 years of his life he followed the toxic manly trait of never talking about your mental health, and how hard it was to not only see a therapist about it, but how hard it was to actually open up about it. And that was a really big deal because, you know, not many NBA players or professional athletes in general are going to go public about that sort of thing because they live the seemingly perfect life of playing sports for a living. But, you know, if you're not an idiot, you know that materialistic things are not going to solve your mental health problems. He didn't want to open up because he was afraid that people would view him as weak, but I mean, it takes a lot more courage to be public about that sort of thing than keeping it hidden. Steph Curry and J. Cole were two guys that had a lot more in common than I originally thought when I was doing the research for this video. At first I had them paired together just because they're pretty underrated at an all-time level, and they both have remained super humble despite all their success, but they have a lot more in common than that. Cole makes it pretty well known that he's from North Carolina, but the thing I didn't know before making this video was that Steph Curry also grew up there. But I guess it does make sense because Dale Curry did play there for a long time. What's even crazier to me was that while they both grew up there, they were both born outside of it. Cole was born in Germany and Steph was born in Ohio. Another comparison was that they both married the woman they were with before the fame. Steph is obviously married to Aisha, you know, that's a pretty public relationship, and they met in high school during church group, while J. Cole met his wife at St. John's. And I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate because J. Cole's a pretty private guy. He doesn't let many details about his life out there like that, but that's what I read somewhere. And the fifth dot I connected was that they were both offered walk-on spots for D1 basketball teams, but they both rejected them. Cole tried out for the St. John's basketball team his sophomore year of college, and he did get an offer to be a walk-on, but decided he'd rather focus on music when he saw how much time and effort it consumed, and figured it wasn't really worth it because walk-ons don't usually get in games unless it's a blowout. He definitely made the right decision. Steph was offered a walk-on spot at Virginia Tech, but they didn't really want him. They only offered him the spot because it was his dad's alma mater. You know, it was more so a favor to Dell than anything. He rejected that offer and decided to attend the much smaller Davidson College because they would give him a fair shot, and he definitely delivered.
High five.